Good afternoon. Yes, I'm filming this from my car today, waiting for Travis to get done with an event, and thought I had some extra time, so I'm going to go ahead and record this right here. Happy Wednesday of Holy Week. We're right in the middle of the greatest week of history, where Jesus humbly rode into Jerusalem on a donkey to celebrate the Passover with his disciples. By the end of the week, he was betrayed, abandoned, denied, falsely accused, mocked, judged, beaten, scourged, stripped, crucified, dead, and buried for you and for me and every sinner on this planet, all of us. But that wasn't the end of the story, as we'll celebrate on Sunday. As a congregation, we're reading through the Bible using the 1 year chronological reading plan. This week, we read through the book of Joshua. After 40 years of wandering in the wilderness after the death of Moses, the people were finally ready to enter the promised land with Joshua as their new leader. Joshua had big shoes to fill, but God encouraged him, telling him to be strong and courageous, for the Lord would be with him wherever he went. When the priests carrying the Ark of the Covenant stepped into the Jordan River, God opened the waters and made a way for them to cross on dry ground, like they had crossed the Red Sea. The surrounding nations heard about it and were terrified. When the Israelites entered the Promised Land, God stopped giving them manna, the food that had sustained them all through the wilderness. The people were probably glad not to eat manna anymore after 40 years. Joshua had the leaders of the tribes set up 12 stones from the Jordan River as a memorial. He reestablished God's covenant with them. Then the commander of the Lord's army appeared to Joshua. And Joshua asked, "Are you for us or for our enemies?" And the angel said, "Neither, but I have come. Take off your shoes, for you are standing on holy ground," just like Moses at the burning bush. The first big challenge that Joshua faced was the huge fortified city of Jericho. The Israelites sent some spies to find weaknesses in the city. They stayed in the house of Rahab, a prostitute living in Jericho. She lied and misdirected the soldiers who were looking for the Israelite spies. She hid the spies and helped them escape. To the people of Jericho, Rahab was a traitor, but to the Israelites, she was a hero. She saved the lives of the spies and gave them valuable information that helped them encourage the people. The Israelites were true to the promise that they had made with Rahab. When they saw the scarlet cord that she had tied in her window, they spared her and her family. Eventually, Rahab became part of the Israelite family tree that led to King David, and much later, to Jesus. She is one of the few foreign women listed in the genealogies in the Bible. God chooses the most unlikely people for his kingdom purposes. God gave the Israelites a strange battle plan. Their army was supposed to walk all the way around Jericho, blowing trumpets, but not shouting or saying a word. They were to do that once each day for 6 days. On the 7th day, they were to march around the city 7 times and then shout, and the walls would fall down so they could take the city. They had to trust God. Do you remember the song, "Joshua Fought the Battle of Jericho"? The song is wrong. God fought the battle. The Israelites were to honor God by not taking any of the plunder from Jericho. But one man did, hiding some things in the ground under his tent. When they tried to capture the city of Ai, they were completely routed. Joshua figured out who had done it and had him and his entire family put to death. Then they set an ambush against Ai and were able to capture it. The men of Gibeon, another local town, heard God had given the Israelites the land, and so they deceived the Israelites with a clever ruse. They put on worn-out clothing and sandals and took with them old water skins and moldy, dry stale bread, and said, we're from people from a distant land, and we'd like to make a treaty with you. And the Israelites said, how do we know that you're not one of our neighbors that we're supposed to conquer? And they said, oh, well, as you can see, we've come such a long way that, all of our clothing is worn out, and these wineskins that we have, they were fresh when we left, and now they're old and split open. And, this food that was fresh out of the oven when we left, and now it's moldy and dry and stale. And so they made a treaty with them, only to find out shortly later that they were actually their neighbors. And so the Gibeonites became woodcutters and water carriers for the Israelites. Joshua protected the Gibeonites when the kings of the surrounding towns tried to destroy them. Among others, the Israelites captured the city of Jerusalem, which one day became their capital under King David. You have to admit, the book of Joshua is a bloody story. What do we make of these commands from God to completely wipe out the people living in the land? What kind of God sanctions genocide? In the description of this post, I'll give you links not only to the Bible Project's video on the story of the book of Joshua, but also to their video entitled Joshua and Making Sense of Divine Violence. It points out that we have to see the book of Joshua in the wider story of God's faithfulness to his promises to Abraham. Even in the book of Joshua, God was building a multi-ethnic family to bless and restore the world. Ultimately, the story of the Bible points beyond Joshua to Jesus, who is the culmination of God's purpose and plan. He took our sin and violence into himself. He died and rose as God's ultimate response to human evil. Jesus is our true leader and moral guide, the beginning of the new creation. That's what Holy Week and Easter are all about. Paul Tripp says, it's tempting to think of Joshua as being the hero of the book of Joshua. The book is named after him, but he's far from the hero. God is the hero of the book of Joshua and the whole Bible. In fact, Joshua's name actually means Yahweh saves. It's the same name in Hebrew as Jesus. Joshua's name points to the need for a redeemer. It points to the coming of Jesus the Messiah. God won't always work the way you expect him to work. He won't deliver his promises the way you expect. But take heart, you're not alone. That has always been the experience of God's people. You can't judge the goodness of God by your little interpretation of your present experience, because perhaps in that very difficult thing, God is doing something awesome, something you could never earn, you could never deserve, you could never achieve on your own. If you're God's child, you know that God gives and you receive. That's the grace of the gospel. Hope to see you tomorrow night at 7 for Maundy Thursday worship. We'll have several students receiving their first communion. Good Friday worship will also be at 7. Both of those services will feature our Christ on Trial drama as it comes to its conclusion. We'll hear from Simon Peter and then from the prosecuting attorney who will give his closing arguments in the case, asking us to give a verdict on who Jesus is and what he has done. There will be no Sunday school or adult education on Easter Sunday. We will have Easter worship at 8:30 and 11 with Ella Croning providing special music. We will also host a sunrise service at 6:30 with people from St. James joining us, along with a special coffee hour with delicious breakfast treats in the lobby and meeting room afterwards. See you there. Have a great Holy Week.